I read this book in 26 minutes and I'm feeling really informed because I better understand contradiction, ASWAD, and Kneebone. So let's get into it. This is 26-minute reads with me, Mya D, and this reading vlog is kind of like my accountability space because in these videos, I share my takeaways from my current read. And this is book number 2 of my 26 to 26-minute reading challenge, where I'm reading 26 minutes per day, every day. So this is definitely more like slow reading than speed reading. It's also an act of self-love, an investment into myself, and as a way of providing myself with some consistency in an ever-changing world. And I hope that that is enough for you to join me along in this journey by reading along with me and leaving some comments down there in that comment section so that there's an actual dialogue going on. Well, this week I read pages 171 through 221 of this book right here, Dancing the Afrofuture by Dr. Halifu Osumari. And let's get into these takeaways. Let me get my notes. Takeaway number 1 is contradiction. And on page 171 of the book, we find these words, and I quote, "It is a direct contradiction to the U.S. stereotype of the music being bred only in the ghetto by poor school dropouts headed toward incarceration," end quote. This book allows us, the reader, to travel with Dr. Osumari as she transitions from performer to dance scholar. And at this point in the book, we are with her while she's in Ghana for a Fulbright residency, and she's using that residency to inform her research in preparation for a new book. During that time, she encounters a hip life musician, and notice I said hip life, not hip hop. Hip life musician named Obor. I think I'm saying that correctly. If you can help me out in the comments below with making sure that I'm saying that correctly, assisting me in that, go ahead and do that in the comments. Who describes the 5 developmental stages of hip life. Dr. Osumari then translates that or simplifies it into 3 stages: imitation, adaptation, and indigenization. And if I understand it correctly, hip life is the indigenization product of American hip hop. And Osumari notes that there's a direct contradiction between the stereotype hip hop artist and that of the Ghanaian hip life artist, in that the hip life artist tends to be someone that is well educated and coming from a middle class family. As the author notes, I'm going to read this quote, "Ghana provides just the opposite scenario. Upper middle class youth with education could more easily access global Western values and are fluent in the all important English language," end quote. That's the contradiction. At the same time, I see this level of alignment between the intention of some of the original progenitors of hip hop and the current Ghanaian hip life artists that use their work to enlighten Ghanaian youth, to critique social norms, as well as elevating awareness around social political events and the value of African traditions. Some of this is present if you've watched the Netflix documentary Hip Hop Evolution, but here's an example. There's an intentional use of names like Africa Mbada, Zulu Nation, as well as the inclusion of African symbols in their attire and even speaking to the social political events. So yeah, I feel like there's this alignment of direct intention between the current hip life artists and the progenitors of hip life. There seems to be this level of Sankofa, that idea of reaching back to move forward in both the cases of the originators of hip hop and the current hip life Ghanaian artists. At the same time, as we step into takeaway number 2, I feel like it's a great time to say that while I do have several decades of experience as an educator, as a dancer, and as a curriculum writer, that I am not the know-all be-all for this book right here. I'm simply providing a space for dialogue so that we can be better educators for those that are in front of us right now and those that are coming after. So Just consider that. Be kind, be generous with your information, and let's grow together as we step into takeaway number 2, which is ASWAD. On page 175 of the book, we find these words, and I quote, "An Oxford-educated, well-known feminist scholar, she was then president of ASWAD." End quote. The previous quote describes Dr. Abena Busia, and can be found in the Working with ASWAD and Teaching the National Dance Company section of the book. In 1989, Dr. Osumari actually hosted Dr. Busia at Stanford, as Dr. Busia did a reading for one of her poetry books. So this is not a new relationship, but it's in this year, this 2008 experience, that Dr. Busia asked Dr. Osumari to join the planning committee for the ASWAD conference. One of the things that I really like about these books, about reading in general, is that it allows you to learn and travel mentally to a space that you might not have been to. But it's also a way of introducing you to new ideas, new thoughts, and new events. And in this case, ASWAD is one of them. It's actually an acronym for the Association for Study of Worldwide African Diaspora. This conference convenes international scholars seeking to further our understanding of the African diaspora. ASWAD is actually a annual festival, meaning it happens every 2 years in different places around the world. The 2005 conference was held in Rio de Janeiro. The 2007 conference was held in Barbados, and the upcoming 2009 conference would be held in Africa, and that would be the first time that it was going to be held in Africa. And if I've done my math correctly, the next festival should be in 2025. So I'm excited to get information about it and participate in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So if you've gone to the festival before, if you have some ideas that you are willing to share, please drop it in the comments below as we step into our third and final takeaway. Takeaway number 3 is knee bone. And on page 210, we find these words, and I quote, "The knee bone," oh, let me try it again. Rewind the tape. Here we go. On page 210 of the book, we find these words, "The bent knee bone symbolizes the ability to get down." End quote. That was much better that second time around. Sometimes we just need a little sometimes we just do it better the second time. Okay. In this part of the book, we are with Dr. Osumari as she participates in a Juneteenth celebration that happens in Sacramento, California. Juneteenth is a holiday celebrated on June 19th that commemorates the reading of General Order Number 3 to the enslaved people on the Texas island of Galveston. There are several hypotheses as to why it took 2 years for the enslaved people to learn that that slavery was no longer a thing in the United States. There's several hypotheses, but here's what we do know. We know that on that date, Major General Gordon Granger of the Union Army read the order to the enslaved people, and that initiated a celebration. In this section of the book titled "Becoming a Public Intellectual and Celebrating Blackness," it is the year 2010. And Sacramento, there's a Juneteenth celebration in Sacramento, which includes a ring shout. And this is happening not too long after Dr. Osumari has just returned from a family reunion in Galveston, Texas, which is the birthplace of the Juneteenth celebration. A ring shout is one of the earlier forms of American dance that is the intersection of Christian songs as well as traditions of African traditions and practices. And it was originally performed in a counterclockwise circle on the slave plantation. I see the ring shout as an adaptation by the enslaved people that manifests in both language and in movement. In the case of the one performed in 2010 at the Sacramento celebration, it uses the song "Knee Bone Bent." This section of the book also includes notes from historian Peter Woods, who describes the knee bone bent having multiple reasons, multiple meanings. One of them, he believes that the slave masters understood that as a nod to the posturing that people would take during Christian prayers. So as a slave master, listening to them talk about the knee bone, that the slave master might have felt like, oh, my enslaved people are adopting Christian values. At the same time, this knee bone bent is a reference to African values, where the bent knee specifically, allows for more movement in the hips, symbolizing mobility, freedom, and life. Whereas the straight leg symbolizes death. Thinking about the straight leg, the straight rigid leg of somebody that is no longer living. As a dancer, this bent knee, this knee bone bent, stands out as language and movement that conveys cultural knowledge. It also reminds me of Deidre Scalar's 5 premises to culturally, I got excited. 5 premises to culturally responsive dancing, specifically premises number 1, which is movement knowledge as cultural knowledge, and premises number 2, which is movement knowledge is both conceptual and kinetic. In the case of the ring shout, the posturing of the bent knee demonstrates the values of a community. So the movement seemingly cloaked under the veil of Christianity is actually an act of resistance, an act of perseverance that demonstrates the values of the enslaved people. When danced in the present time, it reminds us of where we come from, what has happened along the way as we move forward, and helps us to prevent historical amnesia. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for a good book to read, so you can also drop the title of a book or just a book emoji so that I know that you were here with me. This has been 26-Minute Reads with me, Mya D. There's some great things in those details below. Remember to like and subscribe if you liked this video or found it interesting in any kind of way. Stay blessed, spread a good word, and I'll see you again soon.